非常谢谢各位今天百忙时候还参加我们这个线上会议。那各位可以参加这个线上会议。原本我们老板是要来主持啊，他也要给我们一个，但是我们老板今天因为家里有点事情，所以没有办法参加。不过还是非常感谢。那我们也很感谢地科中心提供我们的机会，因为我们的东西跟地科其实蛮多相关的。其实我们也会持续的跟国外联络，希望给大家一些国际上的那些seminar 或者一些相关的资讯，那也希望大家可以持续注意。然后呢，我们等一下他开始的时候，您可以在讯息 Teams 这个部分，不知道各位熟不熟悉？您可以在 Teams 上面的部分有一个讯息，您可以随时都可以问一些问题。那问题我们会有另外的同仁 Derek 看那些问题，如果是需要直接打断瑞来请他回答的，我们也会做。那相关的如果其他问题，我们会在最后有5分钟的 Q&A。那我们预计这个演讲大概40到50分钟，40到50分钟。那个最后我们也会留下录影跟相关资讯。那各位有其他问题，我们也后续有些后续也会做相关回答。那不晓得到目前为止有没有什么问题？如果没有问题，大家持续也可以在message 上跟我们做相关的互动。那我没有的话，我就请瑞先开始了。我们先介绍一下瑞是我们 WDA 的这个 project 的负责人。那他自己其实有哥伦比亚的 PhD 的学位。那他负责的是我们跟学会合作，学会很多典藏的一些独有的特殊的资料，我们都把它扫成电子档在网络上。在平台上给您做方便的搜寻，那平台功能也非常强大。那刚刚有提到斯卡罗，那斯卡罗其实在里面我们这资料我们自己有找过，我觉得还蛮有趣的，因为斯卡罗最近很红嘛。那我们在上面都有找到相关的资料。那今天也会提及我们会有跟 RGS， 这是跟美国国家地理学会合作的资料库。那它也有一些 fellow 的 program， 那这个部分他今天也会说他们怎么样运用这个东西来做相关的研究。那你也可能会找到一些古代地理或一些相关的资讯。那这个部分，那瑞本身是一个纽约客，他其实非常好相处，他有来过台湾，他也蛮喜欢台湾的。那希望大家可以多多跟他做互动。Ray, thank you. I just introduced you and you can start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you too for joining us this evening. I will talk to you tonight, this morning, about the Wiley Digital Archives program and about connections to research in the geosciences. And I am trying to speak slowly, but I live in New York and may wind up speaking quickly. So please let me know if there is any trouble understanding me or hearing me. Thank you to the Earth Science Research Promotion Center for having us as guests this morning. Today, we will talk about the Wiley Digital Archives program, some of the partner institutions that we have partnered with to digitize archival material and primary sources. I'm going to show you the platform that we use for primary source research, which is different than the Wiley Online Library, something you might be more familiar with. And we'll look at some primary sources that are connected to the geosciences and to some of the themes that the ESRPC is focused on. At the end, I will also show you some brand new scholarship that was coming out of the Royal Geographical Society's archives, including some of the works done by recent fellowships. And then we will have a few minutes to ask some questions as we go. Gary and I were talking a few days ago about a TV series that was coming on in August in Taiwan, Formosa 1867. And I got excited because it was on Netflix, but not in the United States, not yet. But I looked up the rover, the name of the ship that was involved in this incident in 1867, and this was a US ship. I did not know this story before, and I found it in a few different places, and discussion of this incident in the Royal Geographical Society archives. And one of the things I've noticed is that the perception of what happened, who was involved, what happened after, who was responsible for this, changes over time, much like geological change, but much faster. And today we'll go through the archives and start to look at material that shows that progress of science, of medicine, of history over time, and also data that may be useful not just for looking backwards, but for understanding the present in the geosciences and also for looking forward. So I will take a step back first and introduce the program. The Archives program is something different at Wiley than maybe you are familiar with. So my colleagues at Wiley, who also build some of our journals and publishing, they are thinking about the next thing, about the latest in the sciences and medicine and other areas. My job is to look backwards, to think about the evolution of the sciences, to use the past to understand the present and the future, and to look for connections in natural history, in science and technology, to emerging research. So how can primary sources inform research that is going on today? And we're trying to bring out material that's never been digitized before. So before today, if you wanted to use this content, you would need to visit the Royal Geographical Society archives, for example, or with another partner, the Royal Anthropological Institute, or the New York Academy of Sciences. And with travel being even more difficult now, especially perhaps for students, it can be even more difficult to access these materials. So it is a good time to have digital materials. And I want to be clear, the content inside the program are not journals. There may be some journal manuscripts, but there is a lot of correspondence, a lot of photographs, many maps, many drawings, sketches, field notes. You will see the internal workings of society. So much like your own group, how they decide what their topics and themes are, the internal discussion about the priorities of that organization. And you can see how funding and research change over time according to what's going on in the world, and also according to where science thinks it can be impactful on public policy, on public health, on regulation, on law, even interacting with culture and with people. Our partners are primarily learned societies at the core of our efforts, but we also partner with universities and research institutions. And a list here, you can see there's the British Association for the Advancement of Science, the RGS, which we'll talk about this evening in more detail, Royal College of Physicians, the RAI, the Anthropological Institute, the New York Academy of Sciences, and we are in the process of deciding a new archive for this program, working with advisors to understand what those are. And when I say digitize, I should also point out that we also work on conservation care, repair, cataloging, cleaning. So these are my conservation care teams and photos they took. And all I am trying to express here is that even if you had visited the Royal Geographical Society or the New York Academy of Sciences, you may not get access to this material because it needs repair or care or has not been cataloged. So in addition to digitizing the material, we are also helping to repair and organize that material for future research. And the benefit of looking at this from a multidisciplinary perspective is that if you are considering topics in the geosciences, the New York Academy of Sciences might think about a perspective on energy and resources, right? If you are looking from the Royal College of Physicians, and there's more topography and geology in the Royal College of Physicians than I expected, they're thinking about the environment. The British Association for the Advancement of Science, or BAAS, was pivotal in the Industrial Revolution and in thinking about how to get more coal to make machines go faster so the machines could dig out more coal. And then the RAI was thinking about things like atmospheric change or hydrology or hydraulic projects. And I'm sorry that I can't see to mute whoever might be making some noise in the background, but I will try, on indigenous peoples. And I would just ask if you're not on mute, please do set up your mute unless you are asking a question. Thank you. So very quickly, the British Association for the Advancement of Science goes from 1830 until the 1970s. And you'll see that this material goes right through the copyright dates. And that is because most of this content comes from these societies. It is not published by someone else. So we are not held up by the artificial barrier of copyright for digitization, which means we can do longer studies and more 20th century studies. And the BAAS was held at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, the basis of our archive. And then we worked with 10 universities, and I will go quickly through this material. 10 universities to find collections that correlate because the BAAS met at a different university every year, including in Canada and the US. So we worked with Liverpool, Senate House, University College London, King's College, Glasgow, Greenwich, and others. And you can see here there's the Natural Resources Institute, for example, which might be interesting, or the Sedgwick papers in geology, to bring the material together. So instead of having to go to 11 different places to use this material in research, you can now access this in one. And I want to focus on the RGS. So Gary and Derek are going to send these after, which have more of the details. But all of these societies have Nobel Prize winners. They have discoveries to their name, and all of them are still active and working in these same areas. I think the interdisciplinary nature of the sciences collections represents the emergence of science. And you will see photographs as soon as photography becomes available, and the evolution of photography itself through the lens of the sciences. And here, it's a very long list, but you can see some of the subjects and themes. There was a special section devoted to geology in the BAAS. As I mentioned, the Royal College of Physicians, and I know this group may not be too interested, so I will fast, really goes back to 1100. So King Henry VIII was the one who granted a royal charter to the Royal College of Physicians in 1518, but the papers go back a few centuries more, so there's about 7 centuries worth of content here. And the RCP helped to develop what it means to be a doctor in the Western world, what the education needed to be, the textbooks, and really the dialogue, which I believe is important because it's going on in the United States, it's going on in Taiwan, as I've learned with conversations with Eric and Gary about how much authority the government has about public health, right? What is quarantine, what is lockdown, masks, vaccinations. These were all topics that run through this archive. But as I said, this may not be at the core of the interest for our guests today. So I will move forward to the Royal Anthropological Institute. Also a surprising amount of environmental history and geological and topographical history. The RAI goes back and began as the Aborigines Protection Society. And that society was founded for the protection of Aboriginal people, and I'm using the context of the society and the jargon or words of the time rather than words we might use now. The Aborigines Protection Society was founded by British scientists who were seeking to protect Indigenous peoples from the excesses of the British Empire, which is interesting. So they already knew the empire and imperialism was having a negative effect on Indigenous peoples. The RAI archive contains a great deal of photography, drawings, and images of cultural objects, art, not just from Africa, where you might expect some of this to focus due to the interest of the British Empire. Yes?
Ray, sorry
yes.
to interrupt you. There is some noisy, sounds like a fan from your side. Maybe you can just check it out.
Yeah, it's not coming from my side. It's there. I think I've muted everybody. I think that will solve it. Is there still noise from my side or no?
No, maybe you can just mute everyone. Maybe
Yeah,
after.
I think I did. Hold on. I believe I did. I did. Okay. I've never done that before because that's not my style. Okay. There are about 700,000 images, including over 150,000 photographs in this archive, and many of them are of the landscape, of the rivers, of the places where people are living. So again, there's a great deal of geography and documenting environmental change over time in the archive. The New York Academy of Sciences was instrumental in founding the Natural History Museum here in New York, and founding New York University. And they were one of the early advocates for science in the United States. Some of the material that may be of interest in this archive relate to a survey of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. There was a long, almost 30-year survey of the geology, botany, and zoology of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands after the United States took Puerto Rico from Spain and bought the Virgin Islands from the Dutch a few years later. And another project covered in here that might be of interest is local to me, where there was a 10-year project to study the waterways around New York City and to come up with regulations for chemical wastewater and for other uses. And as a result, and as Derek and Garrett can tell you, I can go fishing now in the East River and maybe even eat one of the fish if I catch them without any ill health effects. But things like the environmental impacts of mining and drilling, environmental standards, looking at natural history and natural sciences are all covered here. And then lastly, it brings us to the Royal Geographical Society, and we'll go into the archive in just a moment. The RGS collection goes back, and I should stop a second there. Several centuries before the RGS itself was given a royal charter in 1859 from Queen Victoria. The IBG, or Institute of British Geographers, joined in 1995, and they hold the world's largest private collection of maps and charts. We've digitized about 190,000 maps and manuscript maps from this collection, and we'll take a look at some of those. And as you can imagine, a lot of the expeditions and explorers are covered in this archive, but one of the things that I was not familiar with is that each of these famous names like Shackleton or Gertrude Bell or Mallory were brought into the RGS and trained on the use of scientific equipment, right? How to measure temperature, how to measure rainfall, how to take wind readings, or to measure moisture or precipitation. So they were given instrumentation by the Royal Geographical Society to conduct measurements the entire time. You know, they weren't just out sort of having interesting adventures. And the equipment also came back to the Royal Geographical Society, which is another thing I wasn't aware of. So there are some of these famous special collections in here, like Livingston or Edmund Hillary. And alongside this, and alongside the primary sources, of which there are about 2 million images, there's over 80,000 photographs, there's 30,000 lantern slides, many of them unique manuscript maps or hand-drawn, sometimes by a cartographer, sometimes by a person with a piece of paper. And you can sometimes see the difference. This is Livingston when he approached Victoria Falls and realized he was not going to get up the river and over the falls as he planned. And the range of areas of the world and themes in here, including colonial history and the ways that institutes like the RGS or the RAI served as tools of empire in some sense, are covered in here. And we worked with an advisory board. The manuscript collections, we digitized most everything available, but for the library that the RGS had, we had to make some selections, and we also wanted to make sure that we didn't digitize anything that was already available elsewhere. I'm going to go into the platform, and as I mentioned, it's a little different than the Wiley Online Library experience. What we wanted to do is build something for primary source research that is not for journals, it is not for books, but rather it is enhanced with tools that allow you to search, to find, to browse, but also to visualize results, to export data in the archives as data rather than as a picture of data, to use the maps in GIS programs like ArcGIS or QGIS. And we've also added something called automated text recognition, which makes the handwritten text searchable, and I'll show you that too. So I'm going to go over to the archive now. Probably we'll start on the landing page. So each archive has its own page and collections that are within it. And what that means is that if I'm interested only in the Royal Anthropological Institute, I can search that archive. All of the platform instances work the same, but a lot of researchers, myself included, ironically, like to go into the archive and take a box off the shelf and open up the material and go through everything. So we have listed out the archive in a browsable fashion. And what that means is that you can essentially take a box off the shelf, read about the collection, and then look at every object in that collection one by one, the same way you might if you had the box in front of you. And that is for comprehensive research. I can move into, I think simplified is correct for Taiwan, right? And instead I will go here to the cross search. There is always a splash page, and when you run a search in the platform, and in this case I will try topography, or let's say geology. So I'm doing just a Boolean search, and Formosa, an earlier name used by the British. First, there is a warning to let you know that the historical images or some of the text may be considered, or indeed are, inappropriate or offensive. We don't try to cover up the past, and I applaud the societies involved for making sure that they didn't try to. And I can see, I can see a number of results showing up. And already I see recent geographical work in Formosa, characteristics and traits of the islands and inhabitants, and these are results from the Royal Geographical Society, but also showing up in the files of committees and biographies from other associations. And in this case, rather than looking at this broader set, I'm going to look just within the Royal Geographical Society, but I wanted to just demonstrate that the content is much broader across the whole program, and you can see results coming even from the Royal College of Physicians for this subject or this search. But within the Royal Geographical Society, if I just look for Formosa as a starting point, I can see the note again, and it only shows up once at the very beginning. And my results are in manuscripts, in monographs, in maps, in photographs. And on the submenu, I can see that it's broken down further into correspondence, into personal papers or data or meeting minutes. So I can get pretty specific about what I'm looking for. If I go down to the books and look at some of the results there, I can see that there are also results in other languages, German and French, that talk about Taiwan in some way. And if I go through a pamphlet or a monograph, the monograph is laid out for me. And if I'm interested in the relevant pages, it will show me on these pages where the term appears. So it will be highlighted on the text of each page. So I can see, and this has Formosa in the title, so it's going to be easy to find. What's good about this too is that the pages are not just searchable as text. I can also view HTML or plain text of the page. And that is useful because if my first language is not English, I can translate. And this will not be a critical translation or a scholarly translation, but it may be enough to give me the gist, the meaning. So I can actually move around the interface and look at the content in a language that is more familiar to me. And I can always check against the text to make sure that I am not missing any meaning. From this page, too, I can make this much bigger. The resolution is quite high. And if I need to, I can change the brightness, the contrast. I can look at the negative of the image to give me something that is a little clearer. And the document itself is downloadable as pages or text. I can go through that way. And then lastly, I can share this document. So if people in a classroom or people that you are conducting research with are interested in this document, you can share that document right to them. I was going to put it in the chat, but I'm having trouble finding the chat. And anybody anywhere can open the document. They don't need to be authenticated into the institution to use it. If I use this one, it will ask me for the username and password. The difference here is that the share on the right will only give me this document, and I cannot run another search. But the share on the left, you can go on to do more research if you have access to the collection. The citation information is here. You can copy or download or export the citation information as well. And if there are notes about the collection, if there is more information about where it came from, that might be included as well. I can move between results here without having to go back to the results page, which is just a little bit faster and something I appreciate as someone who uses primary sources. I also want to show you automated text recognition. So here I see this ATR note, and what that means is that within this document, we have used automated text recognition to identify the term. So I can see from what's showing up here in the handwriting, in the script that people are using. And this is new. I've been working on digital primary sources for about 20 years. And I just made myself old. And the text recognition for handwriting has always been a big challenge. And this is the first time we have developed a technology that is actually good enough to put into our resource. So I am excited about it because it also means that the handwritten text is now available as print. And again, if it's available as print, that also means I can translate that document now. Whereas before, the handwritten documents would never be translatable unless you went through and wrote out the documents, or typed out, rather, each document one by one. So that is something exciting, and it creates new opportunities for researchers to do new research, meaning something that no one has done before. Another aspect of this, and here I see this indicator on the right, sorry to close that, let you know that there are illustrations within the document. Those can be pictures, photographs, or in this case, tables. So I see there's a table here, and the tables will be highlighted in orange. I can turn that off if I just want to look. But it also means if I click on this table, I can export that table as CSV or Excel files. So now instead of a picture of data, I actually have data. And as researchers in the geosciences, I can see now thermometer, barometer, rainfall in inches, different months over years. The date is on the document, but I have data now about rainfall in Keelung, and I probably said that wrong, sorry, in inches for this year, as well as with an average. I don't know that this data is recorded anywhere else. What's interesting is I can take the data and combine it with other data, right, that is on either end. And now I have a much longer picture of the environment or the climate or the weather or meteorology. for that topic, whereas before this data was sort of trapped in the archives, right? This was not something that was easy to get, or you would have to ask politely for someone to key in that data for you. So the same here. There's a same set of data for a different city or region or town, and I can compare these two now, either against each other or against other data sets. So this is something that is exciting, I think, for researchers. And there are hundreds of thousands of tables inside the Royal Geographical Society archives, as well as archives like the Royal Anthropological Institute or the New York Academy of Science. Here I see that there are sketches, so I'm going to look at a sketch illustration. And I'll open that up and look at this document. You can see this is a hand-drawn original sketch. I can zoom in. I see to Distant Peak, to Suecia. Apologies for my bad pronunciation. Agulam Village, right? So maybe someone recognizes this area or region. This is the plain of Aposia. Sorry, I'm just going to keep getting wronger and wronger. And again, one of the things I like about the tool we saw before is that ink and color fade differently over time, depending on the paper and the ink used. And sometimes the negative reveals more detail than the positive does. So I can get a little more precise with this information. I also saw, I thought that there was a map here. So let's see. This is a sketch of the plains. Okay, here's another. So if I go to this map, and let me turn the negative off, I should be able, for documents like this, or maps like this, and I'll go back and find a map specifically. I think that's maps. Oh, sorry. Tricky for me to move around. So if I look at maps, and here's a map of Formosa from the Royal Geographical Society from 1894. For each map, we have added the georeferencing coordinates. So if you are familiar with using ArcGIS or QGIS, or in this instance, I'll use Google Map or Google Earth because I am not familiar with using those tools. I can go to Google Earth Pro. This is me at home, and this is the glass above me, which is interesting and scary at the same time. And I can upload this map into Google Earth. So the map I just downloaded, let me see, it's in here. Oh, I downloaded all the maps. Okay, well, I don't know one of the maps. It will take me to the coordinates for that map. So I'm coming to visit, and overlay that map at scale. Now, you may notice some difference between 19th century cartography and modern satellite imaging. But what we see here is the ability to take historical material, to overlay that with historical data, and to bring the past to the present. And this actually is fairly accurate for 1894. And understand how population centers may have changed, how energy or hydraulic projects may have changed where people live, or where centers of industry have developed over time, and the impact on people, on the climate, on the culture, even through some of these large engineering projects, but also how the topography of the country itself has changed over time. So there are tools in here that bring the resources out of the database and bring them into what I hope are some of the workflows that researchers use in your geosciences group to conduct research, but also to find new ways of looking at content and think about them more critically. The last thing I wanted to show, well, actually, I did want to show photographs as well. So the photographs, you can hover over and see the list, and we made a bigger visual results list for this. So if I want to see this quickly, I can just pop it open and take a look. And if this is something I'm interested in, again, I can open this all the way up at full scale and pull this in. And again, this is something where I might want to change the contrast. The image is in the original resolution, and if we haven't added any coloring or anything. But sometimes if you play with the original, you can see the picture more clearly. And again, here I can move through the images, and if something is interesting, I can quickly navigate to it. If there are notes about that, and there are, this is a collection of 58 lantern slides made to illustrate a paper by W.H. Murray Walton. And with apologies, the paper is called Among the Mountains and Headhunters of Formosa, read at the Society in 1933. So again, I realize that some of the content may be troubling, but what I like is that the Royal Geographical Society and our other partners have made this material available without keeping anything back, so that researchers can access the material and can make their own judgments. The last part of this are our digital humanities tools, and I think that's term frequency. What this does is show how often a term appears over time. So in 1909, 19 documents out of this collection mention Formosa. I can also see how that stacks up, and you can see this looks very different. So in the same year, 19 of 12,344 documents mention Formosa. So there's a big difference between frequency, which shows you just how many times against the most, which is the top of the peak, and popularity shows you of everything being discussed, this is how many times it was discussed in this year. We also have something called a foam tree or circles. And what this does is take terms that occur a statistically relevant number of times next to your tome and bring those terms forward. And I think the easy way to explain this is that I know Gary, and that means Gary knows Derek, and Derek knows Sophia. So if I search for Gary, it's going to tell me these are the people that they spent time with, these are the topics they talked about, these are their colleagues or their critics, and these are the areas of research they were involved in. So, in the Royal Geographical Society, if I search for a place, a lot of my results will be related to maps. So maybe not the best search, but if I search for a person, and I think that person's name is Murray Walton, maybe I could try that. It will give me the colleagues of Murray Walton, the things that he researched, perhaps where he lived, the critics, all that. So all you need is really the beginning of a topic. And these are different visualizations, but they pretty much work the same way. And this gives you a visual way of understanding what was around and going on at the time for a specific topic. Terms like concordance or collocation tells me that the Formosa channel was the most often discussed phrase in the context of Formosa in the database, meaning that at least 4 times and as many as 9, these are the words that showed up next to the word Formosa. And a collocation tells me the words on either side of the word Formosa. So it's sort of like a keyword in context, and it will give me the beginning and the end of a sentence that contains Formosa. So I can see geography in the mean or Formosa River. There's a Formosa River, it looks like, in Africa. And then I can see the context of which they are being discussed. And I can also jump from that to that document, and indeed there is a Formosa River. So this tells me I'm on the wrong track. And then lastly, there are some word clouds, which lets you know what the focus of the society was over time. And there's one more tool for frequency distribution. And again, these are tools that are taking you out of search and browse and retrieve and giving you a more fulsome picture. of the society. I should mention that part 1 is pre-1900 and part 2 is post-1900. But most of them has both halves of the collection, so it's sort of an artificial partition. And we're trying to create visualizations within this resource that tell you something about what was going on. So I can see which words, which contexts were most popular or most researched or showed up in most of the papers for this particular archive. I was kind of zeroing in on the Royal Geographical Society, but I did want to show you some materials more specific to your topic or your topics. So if I do look for this material for geography or topography, you can see here there's about 6,000 results from the Royal Geographical Society, but there's 1,500 from the New York Academy of Sciences, there's 1,300 from the Royal Anthropological Institute, and I know these are very broad terms, but I'm just meant to illustrate that interdisciplinary approach that I was talking about earlier is represented across the archives. And interestingly, I did look at the Royal College of Physicians earlier, and they were using topography as a term applied to human anatomy, and particularly the brain, rather than in the sense that researchers like yourselves would use it. So this is an instance of a scientific term meant for earth sciences or geosciences being adopted by the medical community and applied to neurology and neuroscience and brain science. So I thought that was interesting to note the way that the sciences borrow from each other. But as you can imagine, the Royal Geographical Society was very concerned with geography, topography, and by default, the environment. So a lot of this content may be interesting or relevant for your research. And the other part of this, I think, that is interesting is the manuscript maps, right? The unique content that we digitized has never been digitized before, which means the research that you may be doing with this material you could be the first people who looked at this after it was deposited, right? The archives themselves are not difficult to access, but you do need to fly to the United Kingdom, and you do need to understand what you're looking for in the archives. So having this available as a searchable, browsable resource opens the material up, I think, for investigation, not just by senior researchers and PhDs and doctors, but also by undergraduates, right? By younger researchers who are just beginning their research pathways. And now they have access to archives in ways that usually senior researchers or researchers with grants and funding have. And now it's more equitable and open for more researchers. The very last thing I wanted to cover back here is that Wiley has supported a number of fellowships, research fellowships for younger researchers to begin using these archives and trying to understand them as educational and learning objects. And additionally, just yesterday, a professor named Dr. Kate Simpson, who works, is a descendant actually of David Livingstone and works on the Livingstone Online Archive, used Wiley Digital Archives to create a new digital exhibit. And I just want to show you an example of the kind of research that can be done here. So what she has created is an online exhibition, and you can imagine materials that are relevant to your research here, given what we've seen in the RGS. But she's combined essays with images. You can see the citations, and written out a very visual and interesting set of materials. And this is something that became possible after the archive was digitized. So putting together these kinds of exhibits and these kind of learning objects is something that I am excited to see and support as a publisher, because this research simply would not have been possible. She's based in Scotland prior to the digitization of this material. And the fellowships again are by younger researchers, and each one of them has submitted a paper and written about the kinds of questions they asked, the kinds of material they found, and they've been interviewed by the Royal Geographical Society. So I would encourage you to take a look and see the types of research that the material is being used for and the research outcomes for these emerging or mid-career researchers. So with that, maybe, Gary, we can stop and answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, your presentation. Yeah, it's very specific from the platform and the scholar and about the fellowship. Thank you very much. So,
sure.
May I transfer to the Mandarin? That everybody have any question?
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. 请问大家有没有什么问题？如果有问题，其实您可以在那个不管用中文用英文都可以在那个 message 上那个写出来，我们会有同事会帮您翻译，就是问Ray。那当然你也可以用英文，或甚至您可以自己跟我们问答都可以。不知道我们大概有问答大概有5分钟，不晓得大概有什么问题。Oh,
yeah. So maybe I should have been clearer. So the question was, can we download the images as images and not just as PDFs? If I understood it correctly.
Yeah, but Ray, when we had a prize trial for the members of under the center, the Earth Science Center. But in the trial, in the platform, we cannot allow the download function. But the subscriber, they can download anything.
Yes.
抱歉，是回答应该是试用的时候可能暂时没有办法下载，但是那个购买之后是一切都可以下载。So sorry, I interrupt you. Yeah.
No, that's okay. You are correct. So we had a few unfortunate incidents with trials where they ran a machine against the database trying to download everything. So we have limited trials so that they cannot have downloads. But if it is critical for you to download a document or to understand, and again, see, I can save the image here as a PNG or as other image formats. Certainly, yes, you can do that if you had full access. I should also note that if you wanted to create an online exhibit or wanted to create something similar to what Dr. Kate Simpson provided, we have higher resolution images that we would provide to you for that exhibit. So Kate gave us the URLs for the images she wanted, and we have TIFF files that are slightly higher resolution and provided those to her for that exhibit. So the images themselves in the database are very good. They're 400 DPI, if that means anything to anybody. But we have a slightly higher resolution file we provide for researchers who are creating online exhibits. The other thing I should note is that there is a tool built into the database if you have a commercial use if you're publishing a book or something other than educational use or for a conference or exhibit, that's fine, that's free, fair, do whatever you like. If you want to publish it in a commercial book or a monograph, you can request permission directly from the society through the platform. And they're very happy to see their material used. I hope that answers your question, Lucas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Citations. Great question. So I went very quickly before Payun. So let me just show you quickly. If I am in a document, there are a few different ways to cite the document. And I hope that moving around in simplified, if it's okay, I will go back to English. It's late at night for me here, and I'm trying to remember where all the buttons are. For a citation, there's a sort of a full citation here, and I can see the collection it comes from. So again, I can go back and see the documents next to it. I can push out quick source citations here. So all I really need to do is click, it'll copy it for me, and then I can take that citation and use it. The last tool is a little bigger, more options, right? So there's a download, which I can download that citation as an HTML file and open that up. So my citation is here. But most people either copy the citation or I could export it, whether that's to Zotero, which I use in my browser up here. I could just click here too, or EndNote, ProCite, Ref Manager, etc. So there are a few different ways to cite it because different schools, different sciences use different citation formats. And I should have mentioned before that if I want to look at this document and this is of interest to me, and maybe there are a couple more that are interesting as well, I can click on those documents, I can save those documents during my session and create a list. So I can see the thumbnail, and I can export that as HTML2. So this is a file on my desktop, where I can see the document thumbnail, which is helpful for me to remember sometimes when I'm looking at lots of material. And there's a link too, which will take me back to it in the platform, directly to that document. So this will go right to the RGS document, not to the landing page or the home page. I have a lot of windows open now, so it might take a second. The other thing I should have mentioned is the history. So I don't know about other researchers, but when I am doing searches, sometimes I try different spellings, different Boolean searches or operators, and I forget what I tried already. So you can see before I was looking for the rover, and if I forget, I can go back and see the searches I already tried, which is helpful. I can also see the documents that I viewed. So if I can't remember what I saw and thinking like, what did I look at before? I know it was something, but what was it? I can go back and view the same document I viewed earlier. So it keeps your memory for you a little bit. I even take a picture of my history sometimes if I'm looking for a long time, so that I don't go back the next time and try those again. There is also help, training, and videos here on how to use some of those more complicated tools, and some of those resources have been translated into different languages as well. So hopefully between this and the thumbnails in the resource itself, which sort of tell you what each thing does, you'll be able to find your way around a little more easily. One of the things about building a few tools into a database is it does make it a little more complicated.
Yeah, I really agree. We have another question about the historical climate data.
Yeah. So, what is it more specific than that, Gary, or? When are there any historical climate data in the WDA? Yes, there is a lot of historical data. It is a little hard to quantify, so saying a lot doesn't tell you too much, but the thing is the terms used in the data vary, right? So if I just want to look at rainfall, and I'm looking across the archives, all right, so I see articles or discussion of rainfall, and what I'm looking for is this image here, right? Which means that there's either a map or a table or a chart. Here it looks like on mean or average rainfall, and rainfall is just one aspect of climate, but I can see these tables, and this is where when I say there are hundreds of thousands of tables, there are, right? So yes, there's a great deal of information, particularly on the environment. And that comes from the Royal Geographical Society, the New York Academy of Sciences, the British Association for the Advancement of Science, and the New York Academy of Sciences. The Royal College of Physicians does not have so much data on the climate, but to find it, right, you can look for words like barometer or barometric reading, whatever it might be, and you can start to see results across the board from the different resources, including the first portable barometer, when they built it, and then notes and tables here. So this is a handwritten table, and I should note that when we're creating these, it can be difficult because researchers don't always say, this is the data from this place, this is the date, and this is the time of day in their notes. And we're looking at someone's notes, right? This is not the publication. This may have never made it into any publication. So it can be difficult to read sometimes. It can be a system that researcher is using, right? Heights in English feet, mean or best observation. I think that's what they mean. They use shorthand sometimes. So, with good research, you can figure out what they're getting at. But to answer the question very, very simply, yes, there's climate data here from several centuries. And the reason I'm excited about the question is that I am working on a new archive. It won't be available for another year or so on environmental history for reasons like the one the person just asked, right? The longer of a picture we have for climate, environmental history, the more informed our understanding of these topics can be. And because government data or non-government organization data only goes back so far in digital format, it all sort of ends in the 1980s, and it's available in print, but not digitally. So we have been creating a large collection of data on the environment in these resources. It is just a little tricky to quantify how much there is, but I'm just doing a very general search on barometer, and it's getting me, I think, close to the kind of data that might be interesting, right? This looks like Haiti. There's tables and data here. I could wait for this and then download it as data as well. So some of the data sets are quite large and run across several pages. And we've been capturing this data to make it more useful just for questions like the question which just posed. Sorry, I could have just said yes, but I wanted to show you.
Yes. We have another question about layers many society in WDA. Can I assess all time at the same time? I think it should be question to be me. I applied all the WDA society trial with this trial period, so everyone can under the 在地科中心底下的 member 都可以啊。我申请是全部。Yeah, I just answered is yes. The answer is yes.
I don't speak Mandarin, but I know what you said.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So to the question for HRM, there are different data sets in the different societies, but I think a lot of them line up. So the RAI's data for a particular region might be taken by the RGS at a different point in the same region around the same time, because they talk to each other, they presented papers at each other's conferences, and some of the members moved from one society to another. For WDA, we don't update the archives, and that is because they are offered as a one-time purchase for institutions. So they are fixed. I can't find a way to keep building them in that model. The other thing I should mention is that for the Royal Anthropological Institute, unless somebody's grandnephew drives up to the RAI and drops off a whole bunch of papers, we've digitized everything in that archive. We've digitized almost all of the manuscripts of the RGS, except for those that were deemed too sensitive, or the person who deposited them put restrictions on them. And for the other institutions like the New York Academy of Sciences, we digitized the entirety of their collection. There's nothing left there. So unless new material is deposited in those archives, If new material is deposited, maybe there will be a part 2 or a part 3, but that might take some time because we wait till there is a interesting chunk rather than 1 or 2 collections from one person or another. So I can't tell you if people are thinking right now about the papers in their great-grandfather or great-grandmother's, attic, and they're going to show up at the RGS with them, and they're going to call me and say, we have new stuff. Maybe, but for now they are fixed, but the program will keep growing. So there are 5 archives now, and I am working on the 6th in this program. I am proposing it to my boss tomorrow, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, thank you. It seems it's the last question, so we have this last question, and then we run out our schedule time. So I just hand over to our Earth Science Center, and there any question in further？ 张浩姐，你们那边还有什么问题？如果没有问题，我们是不是时间差不多了？
没有什么，就是其他的问题，只是非常谢谢。
不会，我想谢谢大家的时间。那我们跟地科中心 Y 应该还蛮多 content， 我想我们可以持续再讨论。也许有一些大家如果有想要的活动或是想要的 resources， 其实可以跟地科中心跟我们这边同时的，就是一起想一想。对。那今天就非常谢谢大家的时间。那后续有任何问题都可以跟 Y 或是跟地科中心反映。那我们也。So we just have finished, and thank you everyone's time, and thank you Ray's time. We're looking forward to your next visit in Taiwan.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.
And I appreciate the questions too. It always helps me to think about what to do next.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a good day. Have a good conference.
Hi, Ray.
Thank
Just
you
say
very much.
hi and goodbye to you.